A rare wild Mustang mare was wandering alone atop the coldest peak in Wyoming. No one knew why she was there, nor did anyone know what awaited ahead. But when the sun first emerged, a miraculous event, something science would call impossible, occurred. What had driven that mare to choose such a harsh, freezing place to give birth to a creature never before seen in the history of wild horses? And why did all those who witnessed that day say their lives were forever changed from that moment onward? I still remember the sharp, freezing sensation that struck me the moment the report came through the old radio in the tiny cabin at the base of Granite Ridge. A rare pregnant Mustang had been spotted, alone, separated from her herd, struggling amidst the most unforgiving terrain in Wyoming. My chest tightened. I forced myself to breathe deeply, to stay calm. But the old images, the memories I thought I had buried, came rushing back like that blinding white storm all those years ago. "Sarah, we need you up here. Chopper's ready." Mike's voice crackled through the comms, short but urgent. "Copy." I replied quickly, though my voice trembled slightly. The radio slipped from my hand, landing on the wooden table with a heavy thud, like a blow to the chest. 12 years ago, in this very place, I lost Wendy, the first horse I ever loved, and perhaps the first soul I ever truly connected with. That night, a snowstorm hit earlier than forecast. The wind screamed like a cry tearing through the mountain. I tried to get Wendy off a collapsing slope, but a tactical mistake, one made by a green, just graduated field researcher, got him trapped. The last image I saw was Wendy turning back to look at me. A look that felt like forgiveness. Then he vanished, into a darkness so thick, it swallowed the world. I've never forgiven myself since. I suited up in winter rescue gear, zipped the collar high, pulled on my gloves, and put on the old fur-lined cap Wendy used to chew on whenever I returned to camp. Outside, the helicopter engine had already roared to life. Its blades sliced the air, lifting loose snow from the ground into spiraling white vortices. Mike stood by the chopper door, nodding. "You sure about this?" I nodded. More sure than ever. But I was lying. Inside, the fear had never really left. Fear of being too late again. Fear of having to bury yet another fragile life beneath a layer of ice and silence. Stella. That was the name they gave the Mustang now struggling at the summit of Granite Ridge. I didn't know why she chose to isolate herself from the herd. I didn't know what was waiting for me up there. But as I buckled into the seat and the harness tightened across my chest, I knew one thing for certain. If fate was calling me to face the past once more, this time, I wouldn't back down. "Please wait for me, Stella. Even if it costs me everything, I won't let you disappear like Wendy." The chopper groaned as it climbed higher into the teeth of the mountain wind, blades thundering against the thin air. From my window, the vast expanse of Wyoming unfolded beneath us, white, jagged, and merciless. I gripped the edge of my seat as ice-laced clouds scraped past the glass. We were climbing into silence. Mike leaned forward, headset pressed tight against his ear. "We're approaching the last pinged coordinates," he said, eyes scanning the terrain below. "Keep a lookout." She was last seen somewhere near the East Ridge. I pressed my forehead to the window, searching. The world down there didn't look like it could sustain life. It was all frostbitten rock, sweeping wind trails, and treacherous slopes. Not a soul in sight. Just the unforgiving kind of quiet that swallows everything. And then, there, I breathed. A white shape, barely distinguishable from the snowdrifts, staggered near a rocky outcrop. I reached over and tapped the pilot's shoulder, pointing down and forward. "That's her. Right there, to the left of that crest." Mike saw it too now. "Copy that. Beginning descent." As the chopper banked sharply, wind surged against us. The shape below began to clarify. Not snow. Not ice. It was her. Stella. She stood alone, one leg slightly buckled, her flanks heaving. Her coat, normally a ghostly gray, was now matted with mud, ice, and streaks of blood near the hindquarters. She was trembling. Not with cold, but with pain. "She's in labor," I muttered. "She's in trouble," Mike corrected grimly. "We don't have a flat zone nearby. We'll need to rappel in." The terrain was suicide, jagged stones slashed with frozen ledges. But somehow, Stella had made it there. She hadn't wandered aimlessly. She'd chosen that place. Deliberately. And that choice disturbed me more than anything else. Why here? Why climb this far, this high, at the very edge of her strength? The rotor wash kicked up flurries of snow as the pilot held the hover. Mike was already pulling the gear from the cabin. I clipped into my harness with fingers that had begun to tremble, not from cold, but from something deeper. Something unsettled. As if the mountain itself was holding its breath. We lowered slowly, rope swaying in the wind. My boots hit the ground with a crunch, knees absorbing the impact. Mike landed next to me seconds later, and the roar of the chopper began to fade as it pulled away to orbit. Then there was only silence. Stella was less than 30 yards away now. She didn't bolt. Didn't even flinch. She just stood there, body sagging, steam rising faintly from her sides. Her head hung low, but her eyes, those pale, alert eyes, watched us. Not in fear. In understanding. I approached slowly, each step sinking slightly into the crusted snow. "Hey, girl," I murmured. "It's okay. We're not here to hurt you." Mike stayed back, observing, respecting the distance. I crouched, not too close. Just enough to take her in fully. She was in the final stages, hip bones sharp, belly low, legs quivering. The Foal wasn't far now. Maybe hours. Maybe minutes. But what haunted me was where she had chosen to do this. The ridge she stood on was completely exposed. Windswept. Dead quiet. One wrong step to the left, and she'd fall into a ravine at least 300 feet deep. No cover. No shelter. No herd. Just her. She'd come here alone. On purpose. That thought sank into me like ice water. Most mares give birth within the safety of the band, protected by others, surrounded by instinct. But Stella had turned her back on all of that. Why? That question pulsed through my mind. And with it came a second, darker, deeper, more personal. Why did this feel so familiar? I looked at her again, and something clicked in my chest. Not logic. Not analysis. Something older. Wordless. It wasn't just biology. It wasn't instinct. It was choice. She had climbed this mountain for a reason. And whatever that reason was, it pulled at something buried in me. 12 years ago, I had stood not far from this very spot, screaming into the wind as Wendy disappeared into a white void. That same helplessness, that same raw terror, it all came flooding back. But Stella wasn't panicking. She was waiting. And that scared me even more. She turned her head slightly, eyes catching mine. And for a heartbeat, I forgot how to breathe. There was no panic in those eyes. No resistance. Only something ancient. Resigned, yes, but also resolved. "Sarah," Mike's voice broke in behind me, quiet, but urgent. "What is she doing?" I don't know, I whispered. But I did. Somewhere, deep down, I did. "She chose this place," I said slowly. "She came here to give birth. Not because she had to, but because she needed to." Mike frowned. "That doesn't make sense." "No," I said. "It doesn't. But none of this does. The sky above began to shift, softening from steel gray to pale gold. First light. And still, Stella stood her ground. She wasn't breaking down. She wasn't collapsing. She was waiting for something. Or someone. And as I stood there, snow biting my cheeks, I realized. So was I. The air shifted. Not with sound, but with something else. A stillness that wasn't natural. Not the calm before a storm, but the kind of hush that comes when the world knows something sacred is about to happen. I didn't move. Mike had stopped breathing beside me. Even the wind seemed to hold itself back, as if afraid to interfere. Stella shifted her weight slightly, and I could see it, the tightening of her body, the downward tremble of her flanks. Her head lowered, nostrils flared. The contractions had begun. "She's going into labor," I said quietly. Mike nodded without taking his eyes off her. "We're not set up for this. There's no med gear. No shelter. Nothing. We don't intervene unless we absolutely have to," I said, almost to myself. But even as I said it, I knew this wasn't going to be like anything we were prepared for. Stella lowered herself slowly onto the snow, careful, deliberate. She didn't thrash. Didn't panic. There was pain, of course, but beneath it, a strange composure. She had chosen this place, this moment. And whatever was about to come, she had accepted it. We watched, frozen in place, as nature took over. It was fast. Too fast. Within minutes, the foal began to emerge, limbs slick and trembling, body curled tightly, as if reluctant to touch the world. Mike reached for the camera instinctively, but paused. We weren't just observers anymore. We were witnesses. The foal slipped free in a sudden rush of motion, landing in a shallow nest of disturbed snow and steam. Stella turned instantly, nuzzling and licking the newborn with practiced urgency. Her movements were strong, certain, protective, but calm. The snow around the foal darkened slightly, soaked in the fluids of birth. For a long second, nothing moved. Then, the foal lifted its head. I took a single step forward before stopping myself. Mike whispered, "No way." The light hit it. And everything changed. The newborn's coat, still wet, shimmered with a sheen I'd never seen before. Not white. Not gray. Silver blue. Like starlight caught in water. Like moonlight woven into flesh. My heart stopped. Its body trembled, delicate, impossibly new, but already strong. As Stella continued to clean it, I saw something impossible, the foal's front legs beginning to fold beneath it. "Sarah," Mike murmured, "it's trying to stand." No. That's way too soon." We watched, stunned, as the foal heaved, steadied, then, in one surreal, fluid motion, rose to its feet. Not with the awkward wobble of a newborn. No staggering. No collapsing. It stood like it had done it before. My breath caught. I could feel my own pulse in my throat. "That's not normal," I said. I don't know what that is." Mike looked at the monitor on his chest harness. Our vitals readouts just spiked. Acceleration rates are off the charts. Could be a glitch. "It's not a glitch," I cut in, eyes fixed on the foal. "That's real." And then, it turned. The foal turned its head toward us. Its eyes, deep, glacial blue, locked onto mine. And it stared. Not glanced. Stared. My knees nearly gave out. There was something behind those eyes. Something that shouldn't be there, not yet. Not in a creature only minutes old. Recognition. Understanding. It took a step. Then another. And then, it walked toward me. I froze, breath caught in my chest. It wasn't fear that held me still. It was something else. Something primal. Something reverent. Stella didn't stop it. Didn't block the way. She stood calmly behind, watching. And the foal kept coming, tiny hooves crunching gently into the snow. 1 step. 2. 3. Until it stood barely 6 feet away from me. Mike didn't say a word. Neither did I. The foal tilted its head slightly. Steadied me. As if it had been waiting. As if I had been the one it came here to find. I knelt, slowly, hands open at my sides. "Hey there," I whispered. "I'm Sarah." Its ears twitched. And then, it took one more step forward. Close enough that I could hear it breathe. Close enough to see the way the morning sun reflected off its silver blue coat, catching every strand of soft, newborn hair and turning it into light. I whispered, "You're not like the others, are you?" And the foal, without fear, without hesitation, leaned forward and pressed its muzzle gently against my chest. They say time is linear. That it moves forward, unbroken, a single thread pulling us from birth to death without pause. But in that moment, when the foal pressed its soft, trembling muzzle against my chest, time broke. Everything around me, wind, snow, breath, thought, fell away. All that remained was him. And me. He was still damp from birth, his breath shallow but steady, warm against my coat. His silver blue coat shimmered with early sunlight, the way moonlight glides across water just before dawn. And his eyes, they weren't just open. They were awake. Eyes too deep for this world. Too knowing. He looked at me, not like an animal sees a human, but like one soul recognizes another. And something in me shattered. A buried memory, sharp and sudden, surged forward, windy. 12 years gone. But not forgotten. The last time I had seen that look, the quiet, steady gaze, full of understanding and grief, was through the eyes of a chestnut colt vanishing into a blizzard, never to return. Until now. Because what I saw in Orion's eyes was the same light. The same presence. I couldn't move. Not out of fear, but because I didn't want to break it. The connection. The stillness. This impossible bridge between what should be and what was. He blinked slowly, and for a moment, I swear, I felt his heartbeat. Not just as a vibration through his chest, but as a pulse that echoed inside me. Like we were tethered. Like a thread had just been reattached after years of being severed. I raised my hand, slowly, deliberately, never looking away from him. He didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned in further. My fingers found the soft curve of his jaw, still damp and quivering. His skin was fragile, like velvet over fire. I let my palm rest there, feeling him breathe. And then, his eyes closed. He exhaled. Deeply. As if, somehow, I was familiar. As if, somehow, he had found what he was looking for. In that exact second, I would later tell a room full of scientists who didn't know how to quantify what they were hearing, time didn't exist. The mountain, the snow, the silence, even my own doubts, none of it mattered. Only this foal. Only that gaze. Only the touch. It wasn't just a moment. It was a return. Mike didn't speak. He stood still a few steps behind, his camera hanging loosely in one hand, forgotten. He wasn't filming. He was witnessing. Orion didn't pull away. He stayed there, nose against my chest, as if listening. As if remembering. And then, almost imperceptibly, he leaned his head against my shoulder and sighed. That was when I knew. This was more than instinct. More than imprinting. More than biology. It was windy, I whispered without realizing I'd said it aloud. Or maybe, what windy couldn't become. I didn't mean reincarnation. I didn't mean magic. I meant continuity. A thread of something unbroken, something that had waited 12 years in silence for the right moment to find me again. And it had. On this mountain. In this snow. Through this impossible, luminous foal. Orion pulled back after a while. Just a few inches. Enough to look at me again. Our eyes met once more. There was no fear. No confusion. Just a stillness, and a presence that felt bigger than both of us. Then, he turned, slow and sure, and walked back toward Stella. She was watching the entire time, calm and steady. No alarm. No protest. When Orion reached her side, she lowered her head and nuzzled him gently, as if acknowledging a journey already completed before it began. And I stood there, blinking back tears I hadn't realized were falling. That moment wasn't science, I wrote in my field journal that night. It wasn't behavior. It wasn't a theory. It was something older. Something sacred. And it looked me in the eye like it remembered who I was. By mid-morning, the sky had settled into a pale, crystalline blue. The wind, once sharp and restless, had calmed into a gentle breath whispering through the rocks. Stella lay curled protectively around Orion, both resting under a jagged outcrop that caught just enough light to warm the snow beneath them. Mike had set up a temporary monitoring station a few dozen yards away, connecting biosensors and logging environmental data. But truth be told, neither of us had much to say. We were still recovering from what we had just witnessed. Orion wasn't merely born strong. He was born aware. Every movement was deliberate. Every gaze lingered just a bit too long, like he was absorbing more than instinct should allow. And ever since that first contact, when he leaned into me like we'd met before, I hadn't been able to shake the feeling that this fool wasn't just reacting to the world, he was observing it. Watching us. Learning. And something in me, something I hadn't listened to in years, was beginning to stir. It began just after noon. I was kneeling near the edge of the clearing, documenting notes in my field log, when I noticed Orion pulling away from Stella. He stretched, blinked slowly, then looked directly at me. And walked. Again. Straight toward me. No hesitation. I stood slowly, not wanting to spook him, but I already knew he wouldn't startle. Orion moved with a calm that defied every behavioral model I'd ever studied. He came to a stop about 3 feet away, just close enough that I could see the soft shimmer of his coat catching the light in waves of silver blue. He didn't touch me this time. He looked down. Then, he used his hoof to draw. At first, I thought he was just pawing the ground. Newborn foals often test their limbs, stamp, explore. But Orion didn't flail. He didn't stumble. He scraped. Controlled. Purposeful. Like an artist tracing the first stroke of a symbol. I dropped to a crouch, breath caught in my chest. 1 stroke. 2. A turn of the hoof, sharp and clean. I didn't dare blink. The mark took shape slowly, a semicircle, flanked by 3 outward lines. Not random. Not noise. A symbol. "Mike," I called, barely above a whisper. He jogged over, camera already raised. When he saw the dirt, he froze. "You're seeing this, right?" I asked, unable to look away. "I'm recording it," he said. "But I don't know what I'm looking at." I swallowed. My throat was dry. It's structured. It's communicative. He's a foal, Sarah. Hours old. Exactly. My mind raced. Symbols in equine behavior? No. Horses could recognize patterns, sure, but replicate them? Draw them? This wasn't mimicry. Orion wasn't copying. He was expressing. I looked at him again. He had stepped back, watching me with those impossible eyes, blue and deep and steady. "You're trying to tell me something," I whispered. Another moment passed. Then he stepped forward again and made another mark. This one was different. 2 concentric circles, a dot in the center, and just beneath it, 2 crossing lines that curved inward like wings. I froze, because I had seen it before. Not in a textbook, not in a data set, but in a dream. 12 years ago, the night after I lost Wendy, I had fallen into a fevered sleep, numb with grief and exhaustion. And in that dream, I stood alone on a snowy ridge, staring at the dark sky. Something had appeared at my feet in the snow. A symbol. A shape I couldn't explain. This shape. Exactly. Down to the curve of each line. My hand trembled as I reached forward, fingertips hovering just above the dirt. I didn't touch it. Couldn't. Because in that moment, everything inside me collapsed into one truth I had never dared to consider. This wasn't just intelligence. It wasn't just anomaly. It was memory. Not his. Mine. And somehow, impossibly, they were the same. Later, I would sit alone beside the campfire, turning the image over and over in my mind, trying to place it somewhere inside science. Somewhere safe. But at that moment, kneeling in the snow, staring at a message drawn by something that shouldn't be able to form thought, I felt the walls of science cracking. A voice inside me whispered something I had tried for years to silence. What if you're not here to study him? What if you're here to remember? My hands were shaking. I looked up at Orion, and he was looking through me. That stare again, unwavering, ancient, steady as the mountain beneath us. And suddenly, I didn't want to explain it. Not yet. Not with terms. Not with hypotheses. Because this moment, this silent exchange, didn't belong to science. Not fully. Not yet. It belonged to wonder. To mystery. To something older than language. That night, as Mike downloaded the footage into encrypted drives and compiled sensor data, I sat by myself, unable to write. The field journal was open in my lap. But I didn't know what to put down. Or rather, I knew, but didn't know how to say it. So I wrote only one sentence. I used to think science could explain everything. But now I know, the world is far more vast and far more strange than we were ever taught to believe. I closed the book and looked up at the stars, dozens of them, scattered across the black Wyoming sky. And I wondered, what else had I forgotten? What else was waiting to be remembered? I heard the helicopters before I saw them. 2 distinct rotors, slicing through the thin mountain air, louder and heavier than our field chopper. Mike looked up from the equipment tent, eyes narrowing. He already knew. I did too. Government. I didn't call for backup, he muttered, standing. I didn't respond. I was already watching Orion, who stood just outside the enclosure, head raised, ears pricked toward the approaching sound. He wasn't afraid, but he was alert. Stella stirred behind him, breathing low and steady, but her body tensed as the wind shifted. She knew something was coming too. Then they appeared, 2 black aircraft, no logos, no visible markings. One circled once before descending slowly toward the lower ridge, 100 yards below our camp. The other hovered briefly, then dropped several figures in tactical gear before lifting again. Mike grabbed the field radio. Unidentified aircraft just landed inside protected territory. They're not on any log. No one's responding, the voice from base crackled. We're checking now. But I already knew. This wasn't a mistake. This was a takeover. Four figures in heavy winter uniforms began the slow ascent to our ridge. The leader, a man in a pristine parka and mirrored goggles, walked ahead of the others, carrying a silver briefcase like it was a weapon. His movements were smooth, assertive, controlled. When they reached us, he pulled down his hood and smiled. A smile without warmth. "Dr. Collins," he said. "I'm Dr. Edwin Holbrook. Department of Wildlife Behavioral Sciences, Division 7. "Never heard of it," Mike said beside me, arms crossed. "You wouldn't have," Holbrook replied smoothly. "Our work is highly specialized." I stepped forward. "This is a protected observation site. We're operating under Bureau of Land Management protocols. You're trespassing." He lifted a gloved hand in polite dismissal. "Not anymore. As of 0600 hours, this operation has been reclassified. The specimen falls under federal jurisdiction." I blinked. "Specimen?" He gestured toward the ridge, where Orion now stood tall beside Stella. "The Foal." "He has a name," I said sharply. "His name is Orion." Holbrook's face didn't twitch. "Miss Collins." "Doctor." "Dr. Collins, we have reviewed your transmissions. You've documented behavior that suggests a significant anomaly, cognitive, physiological, possibly even neurological. That places this subject into a research class beyond your current clearance. We'll be transporting the Foal to a secure facility for further study." I felt the ground shift beneath me, not physically, but in my chest. In my bones. "You're not taking him," I said quietly. Holbrook raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "You're not taking him," I repeated. My voice was steel now. "This isn't a lab sample. He's not a test case or a talking point in your next classified briefing. He is a living, sentient being. And you're not taking him." He exhaled softly, like he pitied me. "Doctor, I know this is emotionally complex for you. But attachment is dangerous in cases like this. The scientific community." "This isn't about science," I snapped. "This is about control. About fear. You see something you can't explain, and your first instinct is to put it in a box and lock it down. But Orion doesn't belong to you. He belongs to himself." Holbrook's eyes went cold. "That Foal is not a person. It is an asset. And unless you want to be removed by force." That's when it happened. Orion stepped forward. Not from fear. Not from instinct. From choice. He walked with quiet purpose across the snow between us. No sound but the crunch of his hooves against the frozen earth. He moved slowly, deliberately, until he was standing directly in front of me. Between me and Holbrook. I couldn't move. Neither could Mike. The air had thickened, like the mountain itself was holding its breath. Orion didn't snort. Didn't flinch. He just stood there, body tall, still damp mane tousled by the wind. And then, he lifted his head and looked Holbrook straight in the eye. I have never seen a grown man freeze like that. Holbrook's mouth opened slightly, but no words came. His eyes widened, the briefcase in his hand tilting slightly. "What is it doing?" one of the agents behind him asked. "It's posturing?" Holbrook said, uncertain. But it wasn't. Orion wasn't threatening him. He was protecting me. He shifted his weight ever so slightly, firm, planted. A silent line drawn in the snow. "You see it now, don't you?" I said softly. "You see what I see." Holbrook swallowed hard. "It's just a reflex. He's staying close to his food source." "No. He's staying close to his choice." And then, as if to drive the point home, Orion did something I will never forget. He turned his head and gently pressed it against my shoulder. Not fearfully, not nervously, but as if to say, "This is mine." Not possession, recognition. And I broke. I reached up and laid my hand across his neck. His body was warm beneath my palm, breathing steady. I felt the thrum of life beneath my fingers, not just biology, but will. Presence. "I won't let you take him," I said, this time to everyone present. "Not today. Not ever." Holbrook stepped back. "This is federal business now. You are obstructing an official." "No," I interrupted. "I'm protecting a miracle." His expression darkened. "If you refuse to comply, you will be reported. You could lose your license, your tenure, your credibility." "Then take it," I said. "Take it all." I turned my back to him and faced Orion fully. I pressed my forehead gently to his. "They can strip titles, not truth." Behind me, Mike finally stepped forward. "If she goes down for this, I go with her." That shifted the air. One of the agents looked at Holbrook, uncertain. The balance of authority was cracking. Holbrook stared at us both, eyes flickering with calculation. He didn't know what to do. Because for the first time in his life, the subject in question wasn't in a cage. And the scientists weren't backing down. He lowered the briefcase. "This isn't over," he said. "No," I replied. "It's just beginning." The helicopters lifted an hour later. No words. No threats. Just quiet retreat. They left as silently as they'd come. I stood on the ridge long after the sound of rotors vanished. Orion hadn't moved far. He lay curled beside Stella again, but his eyes never left me. Not once. He made a choice, I wrote that night in my journal. Not just to live, but to trust. And I made one too. I chose to fight. Because some lives don't need to be studied. They need to be defended. And some stories aren't meant to be locked away. The snow had quieted everything again. The government team was gone. The tension that had carved its weight into every breath was fading, though it left behind a stillness even heavier than before. Not silence born of fear, but the kind that follows something irreversible. The mountain had witnessed something today. And so had we. Orion stood just beyond the firelight, his silver blue coat now dry and luminous beneath the fading sky. He wasn't grazing, wasn't resting. He was staring down at the earth, focused and still, as though waiting for the right moment. Mike sat behind me, silent. He didn't need to ask what Orion was doing. We'd both seen him draw before. But this felt different. He stepped forward, hooves slow and deliberate. Then, as if guided by a rhythm only he could hear, he began to scrape the ground. Line by line. Curve by curve. I rose from the log and moved closer, not too close, just enough to see it forming beneath his hooves. The wind barely stirred, the cold barely touched me. All my focus narrowed into the space between us, into the design slowly blooming into shape in the snow. It wasn't random. It wasn't repetition. It was structured. A large central ring. Branching lines spiraling outward. Smaller shapes placed along those branches, some shaped like humans, others like animals. At the base, a wide curve encircling the whole thing. A system. A story. A bridge. He stepped back, then looked up at me. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't art. It was language. A message. Not written in words or code, but in connection. In shape. In placement. In shared presence. Each symbol, horse, human, tree, sun, was placed not in isolation, but as part of a whole. Interwoven. Equal. Orion was showing us what we'd forgotten. That we were never meant to stand apart. That the illusion of dominion had broken something vital. I stared down at the pattern, blinking through tears I hadn't felt coming. He's showing us a circle, I whispered. Not a ladder. Mike stood behind me now, breath slow, camera forgotten at his side. This isn't just intelligence, he said. It's awareness. I nodded, my voice thick. It's memory. Memory older than us. For a long time, I just sat there beside the message. Watching it. Feeling it. And then, without warning, a voice came back to me. Not from the mountain. Not from Orion. From my past. From my grandfather, sitting in a field with me when I was 7, watching the wind ripple through tall grass. Nature never stopped speaking to us, Sarah, he'd said, tapping his chest. We just forgot how to listen. I hadn't understood it then. But I did now. Orion wasn't just trying to communicate. He was trying to remind us that the language of nature was never lost. We had simply grown too loud to hear it. Orion walked beside me now, his flank brushing my sleeve. His breath misted the air as he looked at the message again, then back at me. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about me. It was about us. Humans. Horses. Earth. Sky. All part of one echo, one shared current of life we had severed in our pursuit of control. And now, through this impossible, radiant creature, the thread was being offered back. Not demanded. Offered. Mike finally broke the silence. What do we do now? I turned toward him, blinking. We remember. He frowned. Remember what? I looked at Orion. At the mountain. At the world beneath our feet. That we're not separate, I said. That we never were. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Because the message had already been delivered. And this time, we had heard it. The snow didn't melt that day. It stayed, soft, quiet, like a veil resting over the mountain's breath. But something inside me had shifted. I stood at the edge of the ridge, Orion beside me, watching the horizon burn gold beneath the setting sun. Down below, far beyond the cliffs and tree lanes, the world churned with urgency, emails, headlines, extraction teams waiting on clearance. But up here, in the cold silence of truth, I knew what I had to do. I wouldn't be going back. Not to the lab. Not to the lectures. Not to the system that demanded proof before compassion. Because some things don't need proving. They need protecting. Behind me, Stella grazed slowly near the shelter we had built from snowpacked stone and driftwood. Orion nudged my shoulder gently, then looked toward the valley below, as if to say, they'll come again. I know, I whispered. And this time, I'll be ready. Mike stood a few paces back, arms crossed, face unreadable. He hadn't said much since that morning. But when I turned to him, he met my gaze without hesitation. You're really staying, he said. I nodded. If I leave, they'll take him. They'll take both of them. You'll lose everything. I smiled, genuinely, for the first time in days. Then maybe it's time I define what everything really means. He let out a breath that was half a laugh, half surrender. Damn, Sarah. You're not just breaking the rules, you're rewriting them. No, I said, my voice steady. I'm finally following the right ones. I sent my resignation that night. One email. No explanations. No apologies. And then I turned off the satellite link. The storm was coming, and with it, Inevitably, the questions, the scrutiny, the demand to dissect what we didn't understand. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Orion had reminded me of something I had long buried beneath data and deadlines. That wonder matters more than certainty. That reverence matters more than recognition. That sometimes, we don't need to dominate nature. We just need to listen. The next morning, as the first light of dawn filtered through the frost-glazed branches, Orion returned to the message he had drawn in the snow. Some of the lines had faded overnight, softened by wind. But the core remained. He stood over it for a moment, then turned, and slowly walked back toward me. As he approached, I remembered something my grandfather had once said, words I hadn't fully understood until now. Nature never stopped speaking to us, Sarah. We just forgot how to listen. And finally, I heard him. I heard them all. As I write these final words in my journal, my last entry before leaving behind the world I once thought I understood, I realized something simple, but unshakable. There are things in this life science will never explain. But when we dare to listen, when we dare to believe, that is when we finally begin to understand what life is truly about. Not domination, not control, but connection. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. If Orion's journey touched something in you, if you believe there's more to life than what we can measure, dissect, or own, then don't let this be just another story. Let it be a reminder. A reminder that wonder still exists. That nature still speaks. And that sometimes, the most powerful answers come in silence. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What part of Orion's story stayed with you most? If this story resonated with your heart, give it a like. Share it with someone who still believes in miracles. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next unforgettable journey into the wild, the sacred, and the extraordinary. Because out there, just beyond what we understand, something is always waiting to be found.